Welcome to HOA Disasters, the channel where we expose the outrageous, the absurd, and the downright unbelievable stories from neighborhood hell. I'm Chico, and if you've ever dealt with an HOA that went too far, you're in the right place. Make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell, because trust me, these stories only get crazier. Now, let's get started. There's something eerie about how quiet the cul-de-sac gets on Sundays. The kind of quiet that feels curated, like even the squirrels have signed a contract with the HOA. Beige houses, retired couples trimming shrubs with rulers, flags spaced exactly 6 inches from the edge of the porch. It's the type of neighborhood where every lawn looks like it's on medication. Matt Calhoun didn't exactly fit in, not because he didn't try. He mowed his yard, waved to the neighbors, paid the dues. But there was something different about him. Maybe it was the fact that he only ever appeared on weekends, always with a little boy in tow. Or maybe it was the big oak tree in his backyard, the only thing on the block that looked older than the HOA charter. The tree was why he bought the house? He never said that out loud, not even to his realtor. But when he first saw it, branches wide and sprawling like open arms, he thought of his son. Jackson was 9 when they moved in. 9, and already carrying more silence than a child should. The kind of silence you get when your parents fight over your schedule in front of a judge. Matt didn't want to fight anymore. He just wanted to build something. And so, every Saturday for 6 months, that's what they did. It started with a sketch on a napkin at Denny's. Then came the trips to the hardware store, the afternoon debates over paint colors, the quiet smiles when they finally hammered the floorboards into place. It wasn't just a treehouse. It was a promise. A stitched-together monument to second chances, held up by plywood, bolts, and something stronger than both. They called it Skyfort Freedom. Not because it was high or fancy. It barely had room for 2 sleeping bags and a shoebox of comic books. But because up there, in the rustle of oak leaves and the quiet flicker of solar lights, there were no custody exchanges, no court dates, no adults yelling in hallways. Just a boy and his dad and the sky. Neighbors watched it go up, piece by piece. Some smiled, others didn't. One woman, a tight-lipped retiree with a clipboard aura, paused long enough to write something down before walking off. Matt noticed. So did Jackson. Think she's mad? Jackson had asked one evening as they secured the rope ladder. Matt shrugged. Only people who don't have tree houses get mad about tree houses. It was the first time Jackson laughed in weeks. On the last weekend of summer, they hung a small wooden sign above the hatch. Matt carved it himself with a pocket knife. No adults allowed except Dad. Jackson loved it, said it made it official. Later that night, Matt stood at the base of the tree, watching the light from the little window flicker like a beacon. He thought, maybe for the first time in years, that they were going to be okay. He didn't notice the camera flash from behind the fence, or the pair of eyes narrowed behind a trimmed hedge. But someone had, and someone was already drafting a letter. The envelope was the first thing he noticed. Taped crookedly to the front door, its maroon HOA seal smeared faintly in the summer heat. One corner flapped in the breeze like it couldn't wait to be read. Matt paused on the porch with his toolbox in one hand, squinting at it like it might be a joke. It wasn't. He peeled it free carefully, not wanting to rip whatever passive-aggressive treasure lay inside. Jackson was still in the backyard, halfway through installing glow-in-the-dark stars on the underside of the treehouse roof. Matt read the top line twice. Notice of violation, unapproved structure. Beneath that, in tight, officious font, immediate remote required, per Article 7, Section 3 of the Maple Glen HOA Agreement. Any permanent structure exceeding 6 feet in height must receive prior written approval from the HOA Architectural Review Committee. Matt blinked. He looked up, then to the backyard, then back to the letter. The treehouse wasn't visible from the street, not unless you were deliberately peeking through the gap in the privacy fence, and even then, barely. It had no plumbing, no foundation, No paint visible from any angle but the inside. It wasn't even bolted into the tree. It was a floating platform cradled by 3 branches, held up with braces and care. It was a treehouse. That's it. Still, the letter was real. Dated, signed, and bearing the proud signature of Darlene Kremer, HOA president. The same woman who once sent out a seasonal reminder that unapproved Halloween decor may result in fines. The same one who once corrected Matt's garbage bin placement by half a foot. On a Tuesday, Matt reread the clause, lips pursed. It was vague, designed to be permanent. Could mean anything. A playset, a doghouse, a bench, a bird bath, or apparently a treehouse. He walked into the kitchen, sat at the counter and stared at the letter. Not angry, just stunned. He thought of Jackson up there, humming to himself, totally unaware that bureaucracy had just entered his sanctuary with a clipboard and a countdown clock. Matt didn't yell, didn't post online, didn't knock on Darlene's door. He wrote a letter. Polite, respectful, firm. He thanked them for the notice and explained the purpose of the treehouse, a father-son project meant to bring stability and healing after a difficult year. He noted that it posed no safety threat, was invisible from the street, and occupied less than 120 square feet. He offered to add handrails or netting if needed. He even invited the board to stop by and see it for themselves. He ended it with a simple request. Please reconsider. 3 days passed, then 5, then 10. No reply. No acknowledgement. No knock at the door. Just silence. Heavy and purposeful. But Matt heard something louder beneath it. The sound of power games being played behind closed doors. And that's when he noticed the agenda for the next HOA meeting. A printed fly slipped under every doormat on the block. Lied fear. Discussion. Unpermitted backyard structures. Vote on enforcement policy update. Matt folded it in half and slipped it into his back pocket. He didn't say a word, but his eyes narrowed just slightly as he looked toward the old oak tree swaying behind his house. The meeting was 4 days away, and he had a feeling they weren't ready for what he was bringing. The chairs were already half filled when Matt walked into the community center. Rows of molded plastic, arranged with military precision under humming fluorescent lights. A folding table stretched across the front of the room, where the HOA board sat like judges at a school recital. Stern, silent, and already forming opinions. Darlene Kremer sat in the center, 60-something, posture upright, eyes hard behind square-framed glasses, a cream blazer, a clipboard, and that ever-present string of pearls. She nodded at Matt when he entered, but it wasn't a greeting. It was a warning. To her left, Gerald, a retired insurance agent who nodded at everything Darlene said. To her right, Linda, a retired school teacher who didn't speak unless she was agreeing. And on the far end, Alan, the only one who ever looked uncertain, like he'd rather be anywhere else. Grocery store, dentist, traffic jam. Matt found a seat in the 3rd row. His backpack rested at his feet. Inside, printed copies of zoning documents, safety codes, county regulations, photos of the treehouse from every angle. He wasn't here to argue. He was here to lay out facts. Item 4 on the agenda came quickly. Backyard structures, enforcement clarification, and vote. Darlene cleared her throat and began. We've recently received complaints regarding an unapproved elevated structure behind 17 Oakmere Drive. According to HOA guidelines, all permanent structures exceeding 6 feet in height must receive prior approval. This was not done. Therefore, the board will vote tonight on requiring immediate removal. Her tone was clipped, legal, practiced, as if this was already over. Matt stood slowly. I'd like a moment to speak. She sighed, but gestured to the floor. 2 minutes. He nodded, pulled out a folder, and began. He explained how the treehouse wasn't permanent by code standards. No foundation, no utilities, Just a father-son project nestled in a tree. He passed around photos showing how it wasn't visible from the street, how it complied with local ordinances, and how it posed no risk to neighbors. He mentioned the safety features they'd added, railings, an access ladder, low-voltage solar lights. He offered to install netting if necessary. He closed with a personal note. This wasn't about defiance. It was about healing. My son calls it Skyfort freedom. It's the only place he feels fully at peace. I'm just asking you to let him keep that. Silence. For a moment, it looked like Alan might speak. He adjusted his glasses, shifted in his seat, then looked away. Darlene's lips curled slightly, just short of a smile. I appreciate your passion, Mr. Calhoun, she said, but this isn't about emotions. It's about consistency. If we allow one structure, we'll have dozens. It sets a precedent. Gerald chimed in. What if every family builds one? It could impact property values. Linda added. And rodents. They nest in wood. Matt didn't flinch. He just looked at each of them, calm and still. In favor of enforcement? Darlene asked. 3 hands went up. Alan stared at the table and didn't move. Darlene's gavel hit the table with a hollow thud. Majority vote. The structure must be removed within 30 days or face escalating fines. Matt nodded slowly, picked up his folder, walked out with his head high. He didn't argue, didn't slam the door, didn't raise his voice. But in his eyes, something shifted, like a gear locking into place. That night, Jackson was already in pajamas when Matt came home. They sat on the back step together, the glow from the treehouse casting soft shadows on the lawn. Did I do something wrong? Jackson asked. Matt shook his head. No, buddy, you didn't do anything wrong. He looked up at the tree, its limbs stretching toward the darkening sky. But we're gonna do something right. It started with the HOA handbook sitting open on Matt's kitchen table, spine cracked, margins scribbled in with pencil. Beside it, his county zoning ordinance PDF, a legal pad filled with notes, and 3 half-empty cups of coffee. The house was quiet. Jackson had gone back to his mom's for the week, and without his son's voice echoing through the treehouse rafters, the silence felt heavier. But it also gave Matt room to think, not react. Think. They wanted him to tear it down. He wasn't going to do that. But if he wanted to fight, he couldn't just fight back. He had to fight smart. Matt opened his laptop and started digging. At first, it was just curiosity. Definitions of permanent structure, exceptions in municipal codes, what even counts as construction in an urban canopy. But the deeper he went, the more the pieces started falling into place. Turns out, Jackson's Skyfort Freedom wasn't just a treehouse. It was a technical gray zone, a structure under 200 square feet, no plumbing, no foundation, built on private land, under Oregon's state code that was considered a non-habitable microstructure. And buried in the city's latest planning amendments was a provision for short-term rentals, even in residential zones, as long as the structure met safety codes and had legal access. Matt leaned back in his chair, heart ticking louder now. The HOA couldn't govern short-term rentals. That jurisdiction fell to the city. They could complain, sure, but if he followed the letter of the law, they couldn't stop him. It wasn't rebellion, it was registration. Look, he got to work. First, modifications. He added a second access point, technically an egress window, just large enough to meet code. He reinforced the platform supports, rechecked the bolts, and installed solar-powered motion lights with timers. No hard wiring, no utilities, just enough for charm and safety. He replaced the painted "No Adults Allowed" sign with something simpler, Urban Nest. Then he pulled out his phone, snapped a few polished photos at sunset. The soft orange light filtering through the leaves, the cozy interior with the sleeping bags neatly rolled, a tin mug perched on the small shelf. It looked less like a kid's fort now and more like a curated escape. He opened Airbnb, filled out the form. Location, Maple Glen, Oregon. Name, Urban Nest Retreat, Treehouse Stay. with stargazer view. Description: perched in a 100-year-old oak, this quiet getaway offers peace, privacy, and a back-to-nature feel, without leaving the city. Ideal for artists, writers, or anyone needing a night above it all. Rules: no parties, no smoking, no more than 2 guests. He held his breath and clicked list property. It went live. Nothing happened at first, no pings, no interest. But by morning, his phone buzzed. And again, and again. He picked it up and stared at the notification. Booking request, 2 nights, Emily J., Portland, HOA. Note from guest: I'm a travel blogger looking for unique stays near the city. Your treehouse looks magical. Would love to feature it in my next piece. 100K followers and growing. Matt blinked, then smiled. The irony was sharp enough to taste. They wanted it gone. But now, the treehouse wasn't just staying. It was booked, business licensed, and on track to become the most legally protected structure on his lot. And the first guest hadn't even arrived yet. Matt didn't expect much from the first booking. He swept out the treehouse the night before, laid out a welcome kit with a thermos of herbal tea, 2 mini lanterns, and a handwritten note. Hope you enjoy the sky tonight. Minjay. It felt small, almost silly, but it also felt honest. Emily J. Arrived around 5 p.m. Friday. Compact car, tripod in the back seat, DSLR around her neck. She was all smiles and flannel, exactly the kind of traveler Matt had hoped for. She thanked him, climbed the ladder with practiced ease, and disappeared into the oak. He didn't hear much after that, but by Sunday morning, the internet did. Her TikTok went up just after sunrise. A soft piano track in the background, pans of morning fog rolling through branches, a time-lapse of the stars through the treehouse window. Then her voice. I just spent 2 nights in a treehouse built by a single dad and his son, and I can honestly say this is the coolest Airbnb in Oregon. It blew up. 30,000 views in an hour, then 50. By noon it was pushing 100,000. Matt's Airbnb inbox lit up like a Christmas tree. His listing climbed the trending charts. 4 more bookings rolled in before he even finished his coffee. By Monday, the entire summer was sold out. 3 months, gone in 48 hours. Each message came with some variation of the same line. I've never seen anything like this. Looks peaceful, magical, like a childhood dream for adults. I just need a break from the city. Guests began arriving by the weekend. A quiet couple from Eugene, a grad student from California, a travel writer doing a Pacific Northwest piece. Matt greeted each one with a smile and a checklist. He handed out maps to nearby parks and house rules typed on a laminated card. Everything ran smooth, except for the street. There were more cars now. Nothing illegal. No blocking driveways. No noise past 9 p.m. But the presence was noticeable. Strange vehicles parked neatly along curbs. A soft hum of conversation through backyard fences. A glow in the branches long after the HOA's quiet hours began. And Darlene noticed. She marched across the street Saturday morning like she was heading into battle, clipboard in hand, lips already pursed, before the doorbell rang. Matt answered with a calm, "Good morning." She didn't return the sentiment. "I'm here to inform you that short-term rentals are not permitted under HOA policy," she said, voice like steel wrapped in sugar. Matt stepped out onto the porch. "Actually, my home isn't under HOA jurisdiction. Not fully." She blinked. "What?" Matt pulled out a folded zoning map, highlighted and notarized. "This lot straddles the HOA boundary. The house is within, but the treehouse, 15 feet behind the easement. That land zoned R2, not HOA regulated. County jurisdiction." He paused just long enough for the meaning to land. "The tree," he said slowly, "is 15 feet outside your authority." Darlene stared at the map, then at the backyard, then at Matt. She didn't speak. She didn't have to. Her eyes said enough. For years, she had ruled this street like a monarch, behind mulch borders and mailbox heights. But the crown just slipped. And Matt? He didn't raise his voice. Didn't gloat. He just smiled and said, "Let me know if you'd like to book a weekend. We give discounts to neighbors." Darlene didn't yell. That wasn't her style. She weaponized procedure, wielded policy like a scalpel. So, after Matt embarrassed her with the zoning map and the line about booking a weekend, she did what any HOA tyrant would do, escalated the fight where he couldn't see it coming. 2 days later, Matt received a letter. Not from the HOA this time, from the city. An anonymous complaint had been filed, alleging improper use of a non-residential structure for short-term rentals. The letter was cordial, but it made one thing clear. An inspection was scheduled. Matt nodded to himself. So this was her next move. He wasn't surprised. He welcomed it. The inspector showed up on a Thursday afternoon, clipboard in hand, city badge clipped to his polo. He introduced himself, shook Matt's hand, and walked the property with quiet professionalism. They climbed the ladder. He checked the railing height, tested the egress window, reviewed the guest rules posted by the bed, measured square footage, checked that the solar lights were labeled low voltage. 20 minutes in, the inspector scratched his chin, gave a low whistle, and said, "Honestly, I've seen actual homes less up to code than this." Matt smiled. "So, all good?" The inspector nodded. "You're cleaner than clean. You even laminated your safety info." As he walked back to his car, Matt spotted a familiar silhouette lurking down the sidewalk. Darlene, standing stiff behind her hydrangeas, watching like a hawk in pearls. She didn't wave. Neither did he, but her plan had failed. Again. That's when the real games began. Within a week, the harassment turned digital. A flurry of anonymous complaints hit the Airbnb platform. 1-star reviews with no names attached, all suspiciously timed. The treehouse had ants. Too noisy, felt unsafe. Creepy people coming and going. None of them matched the verified guests. Airbnb flagged them for removal. But Matt could see what was happening. He got ahead of it. First, he installed 2 motion-activated cameras. One on the treehouse ladder and another on the driveway. Just wide enough to see who was coming and going. No peeking over fences. Then he added a guest logbook in the treehouse, a leather-bound journal where each visitor left a note about their stay. Some were simple, others heartfelt. Needed this more than I realized. Thank you. Haven't heard silence like this in years. My son and I made s'mores and talked for the first time in months. He snapped photos of the entries. With permission, he started sharing them in the Airbnb reviews. One guest even brought watercolor paints and left behind a tiny sketch of the view from the window. But the real shift came when one particular guest checked in. A woman in her 30s, with a quiet voice, a travel mic, and a small sticker on her laptop that read, "Civilian Lawcast." They talked briefly when she arrived. She asked how he came up with the idea. He told her, vaguely, that it had been a bonding project with his son. He didn't name names. Didn't mention the HOA, not yet. She stayed 2 nights, left a glowing 5-star review, and messaged him privately the next day. "Would you ever be open to telling your story on my podcast? I think it could help a lot of people dealing with neighborhood power trips." Matt stared at the message for a long time. Then typed back 3 words. "Let's do it." It was a Wednesday morning when the podcast dropped. Civilian Lawcast, episode 148, when the HOA came for the treehouse. Matt didn't expect much. Maybe a few downloads, a few listeners who'd nod in sympathy and move on with their day. But the host, Dana Lowe, was sharper than he realized. She framed the story not just as a zoning quirk, but as a battle over control, parenting, and what it means to make space for joy in your own backyard. Clips went viral within hours. By Friday, it was on Reddit's front page. HOA tries to kill treehouse. Dad turns it into Airbnb business and wins. And by Monday, it hit local news. Channel 7's evening segment led with drone footage of the treehouse. Soft acoustic music played under narration. A suburban father and his son built a humble treehouse to reconnect after divorce. What happened next sparked a full-blown neighborhood war. They aired the clips carefully. A slow zoom on Jackson's Sky Fort Freedom sign. A side-by-side of Matt calmly explaining zoning codes versus footage of Darlene at the last HOA meeting, jabbing her finger into her clipboard mid-rant. Then came the headline. Link's treehouse sparks, neighborhood firestorm. The next morning, Matt's inbox exploded. Journalists, bloggers, strangers offering legal help or sharing their own HOA horror stories. But one message hit differently. I grew up without my dad. I wish I had something like this. Tell Jackson it matters. The internet, predictably, did what it does best. Turned Darlene into a meme. One photo of her scowling behind her bushes became the watcher. Another, taken from the HOA Zoom meeting, where she furiously muted a neighbor, was turned into a Karen simulator game screen mock-up. The caption read, "Press X to issue citation for grass height." Matt didn't post these, but he didn't delete them either. Inside Maple Glen, the division grew more real. Some neighbors, mostly younger families, began waving to Matt in a way they hadn't before. One slipped a thank you note into his mailbox. Another asked if their daughter could paint the treehouse for a school project. But others kept their distance. Gerald still crossed the street when he saw Matt. Linda had gone quiet. And one night, Alan's resignation was posted on the HOA bulletin board in neat blue ink. Effective immediately, I'm stepping down from my position as board secretary. I believe our focus has drifted from serving the community to enforcing fear. Matt framed the letter. Then he doubled down. The next month, he quietly organized a weekend retreat. He called it Art in the Trees. An open invitation to local artists, writers, and creatives to spend a weekend in and around the treehouse. He capped it at 10 people, provided tea, notebooks, folding chairs, and battery lanterns. Told them to bring whatever they needed to paint, journal, breathe. He didn't advertise it. But someone tagged the retreat on Instagram. And someone else filmed a time-lapse of guests sketching beneath the oak, paper pinned to easels as golden hour rolled in. By Sunday, Art in the Trees was trending. A well-known Portland muralist called it the most peaceful creative space I've seen all year. A children's author posted a poem she'd written on the rope ladder. And Jackson, he sat at the picnic table behind the house, crayons spread across the wood, tongue between his teeth as he concentrated. When he was done, he held up a piece of paper to Matt. It was a cartoon. A smiling beefed-up treehouse with arms and legs, stomping gleefully on a crumpled HOA violation letter. Above it, Skyfort smashes injustice. Matt laughed, really laughed, and pulled his son into a hug. No words, just a long, quiet moment under the tree that started it all. For a few weeks, the air felt oddly still. No new complaints, no letters taped to the door, no sideways glares from Darlene across the street. The retreat weekend had passed. The memes had cooled off. And for the first time in months, Matt felt like the dust might finally be settling. He should have known better. It arrived by certified mail, thicker than any previous notice, printed on heavy letterhead that reeked of billable hours. The envelope read, "Cease and desist, Maple Glen Homeowners Association v. Matthew Calhoun." Inside, 6 pages of polished legal language accusing him of operating a business that undermines community standards, causes a public nuisance, and violates the harmony of Maple Glen. It concluded with a demand: cease all short-term rental activity within 10 days or face civil action. Matt closed the folder without blinking. He'd expected this. Darlene had simply traded clipboards for contracts. But she wasn't the only one with resources. He called his lawyer, Erica Shevlin, a zoning attorney who'd helped him file the original permits. She read the letter, paused, and let out a single dry laugh. "They're bluffing," she said, "and they just walked into a trap." Matt raised an eyebrow. Erica continued, calm and deliberate. "Their letter misrepresents your zoning. The property's use is 100% legal and documented. But more importantly, if they're using HOA dues to fund a lawsuit targeting one homeowner over land they don't control, that's misuse of funds, possibly fraud." Her words were like a match thrown into kindling. They drafted a formal response, one that didn't just deny the HOA's claim, but laid out the beginnings of a countersuit. The charges were precise: targeted harassment, reputational defamation, and malicious abuse of process. And they attached exhibits: anonymous complaint logs, surveillance photos, screenshots of HOA emails where board members referred to Matt as a PR risk and someone who needs to be shut down. Erica ended the letter with a warning. Continued legal pressure will result in the filing of civil charges and a public audit of HOA expenditures related to this action. She sent it certified CC to every board member, and then Matt waited. Meanwhile, something unexpected began to happen on the guests' side. The more pressure the HOA applied, the more guests seemed to adore the treehouse, not just for the view, but for what it represented. New reviews read like protest notes. A peaceful stay despite the nosy neighbor with binoculars. Out like camping with an edge. Freedom vs suburbia. Honestly, the HOA drama made it more special, like staying in a place that dared to exist. Guests began documenting their stays with hashtags like Treehouse Ripple and Escape the Hoe. The listing didn't slow down, it exploded. By the third week after the cease and desist, Matt had bookings stretching into the winter. Airbnb reached out to feature the story in a unique listings campaign. He almost declined, until Jackson asked if they could use the money to build a second ladder on the other side of the tree. And just when Matt thought he'd reached the peak of absurdity, he got another message. Not from a guest, not from a lawyer. From the office of State Representative Angela Cortez. "We've been following your story," it began. "It's raising some important questions about homeowner rights and small-scale freedom in private spaces. I'm drafting a proposal right now. Would love to talk." Matt stared at the screen, and this time he laughed out loud. Because now it wasn't just personal, it was political. HOA elections were normally sleepy affairs. 15 residents at most. A pot of decaf coffee, a clipboard passed down the row with blank lines no one wanted to fill. Most positions went unchallenged. Most votes were whispered agreements. But not this year. Not after the treehouse. Darlin knew it. You could see it in the way she doubled down in the weeks leading up to the vote. More violation notices. More flyers reminding residents about neighborhood standards. More pressure. She went door to door with her platform, preserving the character of Maple Glen. But what she didn't know, what she never even thought to ask, was what character really meant to the people who lived there. Because while Darling was clutching pearls and policy books, Matt was busy doing something quieter. He listened. He talked to families on walks, shared coffee with the young couple on the corner who just had a baby, helped an elderly neighbor fix a mailbox without posting about it. And when the subject of the HOA came up, as it always did, he didn't vent. He just asked, "Would you want a little more fairness around here?" That's how the slate formed. 3 names, all residents, all independents. A young mom, a high school history teacher, and a retired firefighter. None had run before. None had any interest in enforcing mulch thickness or Halloween curfews. They just wanted the neighborhood to stop feeling like a gated compound with no gate. The night of the vote, the community center was packed. Over 50 residents crammed into folding chairs. Some stood in the back. Even Alan, the former secretary who resigned, showed up, arms crossed, quietly watching. Darlene stood at the front, proud and unshaken. She gave her speech, calm, clipped, full of warnings about slippery slopes and lowered standards. Then the independent slate stood. No scripts, just stories. The firefighter spoke about community safety. The teacher spoke about balance. The mom spoke about respect and tone. Then someone raised their hand. It was Jackson. His voice cracked at first, but he held steady. I just wanted a place to be with my dad. That's what the treehouse was. We weren't trying to cause problems. We were just trying to have a quiet space. Thank you for letting us keep that. Silence held for a beat. Then someone clapped. Then another. And then the ballots came in. The independent slate swept it. 3-0. Darlene didn't just lose the vote. She lost the presidency. For the first time in 12 years, she was just a homeowner. No clipboard, no power. Matt stood in the back, arms folded, watching it all unfold. One of the new board members approached him after. We have a spot for you if you're interested. Treasurer? Or maybe architectural review? Matt shook his head gently. Thanks, but I don't need a title. He paused. But I'd be happy to help in another way. Maybe something softer. A community mediation board for when things go sideways. The new board liked the idea, unanimously approved it 2 weeks later. Matt never used the word vindicated. He didn't need to. That night, back at home, Jackson pulled out a blank sheet of paper and started drawing again. Think I should add a second treehouse next to the first? He asked. Matt smiled. Let's take it one fort at a time, buddy. Outside, the oak swayed gently in the breeze. Still standing, still strong. 1 year later, the neighborhood was quieter, not in that brittle walking on eggshells way it used to be, but in a genuine settled peace, the kind that comes after a storm has passed and everything is a little clearer than before. Maple Glen looked the same on the surface. Manicured lawns, clipped hedges, flags still measured with precision. But the undercurrent had changed. The tension had softened. The fear was gone. So was Darlene. She'd sold her home 4 months after the election. No dramatic exit, no parting letter. Just a quiet listing, a sold sign on the lawn, and a moving truck that came and went before anyone thought to wave. Matt didn't celebrate. He just got back to work. Old Skyfort Freedom had become more than a treehouse. After the retreat went viral and the news coverage kept rolling, a travel magazine featured it as one of Oregon's top 10 most unique overnight stays. Another called it a grassroots masterpiece of suburban rebellion. The attention brought opportunity. Matt filed for an LLC and launched Skyfort Rentals, a small startup that helped homeowners build backyard escapes. Treehouses, stargazing decks, meditation sheds, all legally zoned, all STR ready. It wasn't just about income. It was about giving people space to breathe right where they lived. Clients came from across the state, then across the country. He trained a small team, hired 2 veterans, built a library of sample designs, and whenever someone asked how it all started, he'd just smile and say, the fight over a tree, and a big reason to keep it. The HOA, for its part, had changed too. The new board rewrote the architectural guidelines, still structured, still neat, but now with room for creativity. A new clause allowed for small, elevated structures if approved in advance, with clear safety standards and a flexible interpretation of permanent. 3 more families had built treehouses since then. One was a pirate ship, another had a rope bridge, and every now and then, a neighbor would stop Matt during his morning walk and ask, "Would you mind taking a look at my plans?" He always said yes. That fall, on a crisp October afternoon, Matt and Jackson sat in the original treehouse. The air smelled like wood smoke and distant apple pie. A small ceramic heater buzzed quietly in the corner. They had hot cocoa in hand, comic books stacked between them, and out the window, they watched as a guest pulled up in a car with out-of-state plates. The man stepped out, looked up in awe, and took a photo with his phone before walking toward the ladder. Jackson leaned his head against Matt's shoulder. "Do you think Grandpa would have loved this?" he asked, softly. Matt looked out at the oak branches swaying above them, golden leaves catching the sun like lanterns. "Yeah," he said, "I think you would have built it with us." Jackson smiled, eyes shining. Below them, the guests' footsteps crunched across the gravel. Matt gave Jackson's shoulder a gentle squeeze, then stood up and peeked down through the hatch. Ready to greet our guest? Jackson nodded, grabbing the welcome kit with both hands. As they descended the ladder together, Matt glanced back one more time at the walls they built, the laughter they restored, and the fight they didn't start but absolutely finished. Final line. You tried to tear it down, so we built it up, higher than you could ever reach. If this story moved you, share it. And don't forget to subscribe for more real stories where justice, courage, and community collide. Hit that notification bell so you never miss a moment where the little guy stands tall. We'll see you in the next one.